The shine has started to dim for Democrats here in Washington. The once popular party is now seeing an agenda dominated by taxes and spending, America's most hated pastimes. And so we have to think to ourselves, can they bounce back and find their popularity once again? But hey, it's only 1,316 days until the 2024 election. Maybe we just jump in there. Welcome back to the latest episode of The Huddle. I'm here with my colleague, Marc Ross, philosopher, practitioner, strategist, and lover of all things sports and culture. Marc, it has been kind of nonstop. Even though Congress is in recess for the Easter and Passover weeks, we have lots of governing happening here in Washington. I know we brought it up here in the intro, but what's on the mind of a lot of people is how are we going to get more of these vaccines out there? And the big question is, how can you prove that you've had a vaccine? The government says they don't want to be involved. Tell us.
Well, there are two things. Culturally, it's been interesting. I've been seeing a lot of people either like they're taking photos of themselves getting vaccinated, getting the jab, they're slapping the sticker on them, they're showing their vax card. I think that's kind of an interesting cultural thing. Like people are proud to be part of the whole process. So that's super interesting. But what do we do once we're all vaccinated? I mean, everybody's keen to get going, spring break, as we saw South Beach being shut down, that hasn't stopped people. But this idea that's being kicked around, vaccine passports, and what that all means is super interesting. And who's responsible for it? Who's going to do it? Who's going to ask for it? Clearly, though, we're going to have to find a way to demonstrate besides Instagram photos that you've taken the vaccination. The vaccine passport, I think, is a super interesting idea because we probably have the technology. The key is who is the holder of that database.
Well, I know that the stickers have been interesting. It's very reminiscent of the I voted sticker. People want to feel like they're part of the movement to do better for the country. But like you said, this is more than just voting. There is actually aftershocks of importance when it comes to getting a vaccination. And the question is going to be, when you're going to a baseball game, can they ask you, have you been vaccinated? If you're going to go to a movie theater, can they ask you, have you been vaccinated? I saw somebody on Twitter, they pointed out, it's not a HIPAA violation to ask someone if they've been vaccinated. HIPAA is the law that tries to protect privacy when it comes to medical records. And this is the question. Is the HIPAA law actually being misunderstood when it's a question about if this is some kind of civil rights issue? I'm not saying we should go around sticking ribbons on everybody who's been vaccinated or yellow stars, if you know what I mean. But the question is, what is the appropriate and tempered way for a person to be able to communicate to an organization or another person that they have been appropriately vaccinated against COVID?
Yeah, I suspect, and we've seen this from the cruise industry already, like there's been some indication that they're saying if you want to come on our ships to go on a Carnival cruise, you're going to have to prove you're going to be vaccinated. That makes sense to me, obviously, for being in confined space. Both you and me have traveled internationally where we've had to present a vaccination card for various illnesses around different parts of the world. So this idea isn't a foreign, traveling, going international. Where it becomes interesting is domestically, is that a challenge? I'm all for it. I'm happy to give away tons of data and tell people what I'm doing and, been vaccinated and all that stuff. But there are plenty of Americans who don't want to do that. But when employers say, hey, you can't come back to the office, we're not going to keep you on the payroll until you prove you're vaccinated, I think that's going to be super interesting. Already KPMG did a survey. They said 90% of executives are going to demand that, which I think is fascinating. And you already seen the White House, like they're saying, listen, there's going to be vaccine passports. We're not going to be responsible for it. Clearly, private business is going to be at the forefront, but we're going to have to suck it up and be like, this is going to be part of the process. This disease is so contagious. We're going to have to find a way to say, hey, I'm part of the solution, not part of the problem. I've gotten the jab.
Well, I do think it's interesting because we've already seen that the organizing committee for the Tokyo Olympics, which were postponed, of course, because of the pandemic, have said there's going to be no foreign spectators at the games. When it comes to foreign travel, the receiving nation, if you will, for a traveler, has the ability to say that whatever they want their standard to be for entering the country, that's up to their government. And we haven't fought that in a lot of cases. There are countries in Africa where it's, of course, good to get malaria vaccines and things like that. Other countries want to make sure that you're not traveling with different products or different animals, things like that. So why is it that we're so against this idea of presenting a vaccination card when it comes to COVID? Well, I think domestically is where you've really hit the nail on the head, because notoriously, nobody complains like Americans. In other countries, they, of course, don't have all the things that we get in our Bill of Rights. In England, you can't shout anything you want. They don't have the freedom of speech, the freedom of the press, the freedom of religion that we celebrate here in America. Of course, as they're locking down in Germany and France and things like this, they've got to suck it up and just do it. But looking in the big picture, why are we so anti the idea of sharing this? I love the idea what you're saying about cruises. They're proving you're coming into our bubble. Do your part.
Yeah, I think it's just, you hit the nail on the head. Americans love to complain. Americans love to freak out. We haven't even gone through the vaccination process yet, and we're already freaking out about vaccine passports and what they mean. I read some interesting things today. The clinical test for actually the Pfizer and the Moderna jabs, if you get 2 of them, it was only studied clinically for 3 months. That is, you get 2 shots, it was only proven to keep you safe for 3 months. That's only 90 days. I mean, that boggled my mind. There's been some other research that suggested maybe if you've gotten COVID, you're safe for 8 months. Regardless, this is not a full-on solution. There's a great column in The Spectator. They're talking about opening up, European travel in the summer. Everybody wants to, run around and have a cocktail or 2 around the Mediterranean, but there's a huge fear with these new variants. We could backslide. All this progress we've made could be lost because we have a summer of fun. We got to rein it in. Vaccine passports are going to happen. Whether you like it or not, get on board. That's going to be the message. I'm sure Uncle Joe, he's already saying, put on a mask. In the next press conference, he's going to say, put on your app. Show me your vaccine passport. That'll be the next prediction.
Yeah, the idea that this has to come from the private sector is interesting because, of course, big companies like a Microsoft, like an IBM, like Facebook, Google. I mean, who is it that's going to be able to facilitate the vaccine passport? And is that going to make people even more apprehensive? Obviously, we've seen in recent months pushback about Facebook, pushback about the way that companies like Apple or Google are collecting data from you. Now you're going to be asking them to safeguard what seems like not that important of a piece of information when it comes to I got the jab, here I am, I'm safe. At least kind of safe.
Sure. But even 18 months ago, pharmaceutical industry, big pharma, Pfizer, nobody was a big fan. Flash forward 18 months later, people actually tweeting online, proclaiming how much they love big pharma, how much they love vaccines, how much they love Pfizer. I think if there's a solution to be had that's going to help us all, and big tech certainly has got a role to play, they're going to be seen as a champion. They're going to be seen as a force to good. I think it'll change. It's just going to require probably leadership from the top.
It's very funny. I've seen some people say, I want to hug all the scientists who helped develop the vaccine. If you state it a different way, hi, do you want to hug the scientists from this big pharmaceutical company? Reminder, they charge $400 per piece of insulin for your diabetic friends. That these are also still villains to some people. So it's definitely an ongoing debate, but we will find out next week. Of course, we're going to have more here on the Huddle when it comes to talking about traveling, the Olympics, sports, and of course those postponed games in Tokyo. We've got a great episode that's going to be coming up, so we won't want to miss that. But when it comes down to how we're implementing all this, Mark, let's talk about taxes and spending. This is notoriously the issue that can take any politician and knock them off their high horse. What are we seeing? We've already seen the Biden administration admit taxes might be going up for more people than previously promised.
Hey, man, it's Build Back Better. Get on board. Uncle Joe is going to say spending, taxes, infrastructure. You can make the huge case that money's cheap. It doesn't really matter. MMT, modern monetary theory suggests you can like borrow money all you want. You're a sovereign currency, et cetera, et cetera. And I think, listen, as we talked about a few episodes back, the Democrats are saying we're going to go big. We don't really care. We're going to get this done. We have a rare opportunity. I think the combination of the the coronavirus pandemic crisis, the fact that Joe Manchin, right, we're going to talk about a little bit later, is clearly one of the most powerful people in D.C., and the fact that we're going to build back better. You know, Secretary Pete, he's got a bridge to sell for you. I think this infrastructure push, most people have been pretty excited about. Anybody who's traveled anywhere in the U.S. knows that our infrastructure needs a reboot. The real challenge, though, of course, is what does infrastructure mean? Does it mean bridges? Does it mean highways? Does it mean rail? Or does it mean, job retraining? Those are going to be the big questions. But I see this going through. I mean, I think get on board. Joe Biden is focusing on being the next FDR, being the next LBJ. He's going big. Joe Biden. I think he's going to change his nickname to Go Big. Joe Go Big Biden.
Well, I like this because they say if you raise taxes as the president, it could definitely cost you a second term. For a 78-year-old man who's not actually sure if he's going to run for a second term, he might, in fact, take himself out of the running by raising taxes, but he might save the world along the way. I think
Joe Biden is playing a different kind of ball game, different kind of calculus. You're spot on. If you're thinking you're going to do this for one term, which all signs indicate that he's going to revolutionize and change the country like we've never seen before. Clearly, as we've said, anybody who's done any kind of driving in this country knows infrastructure is a key, and we should make this investment. We should pivot to a more modern economy, cleaner energy, revitalize electrical systems. Let's do it. I'm all for it. Maybe the bill will come due someday. But maybe it doesn't matter. I mean, that's the thing. Interest rates are so low. Let's make it. Let's do it. Let's spend the money.
It's only money. Spend the money. Go out there. Revitalize the whole economy in a long-term sense. There's going to be some short-term suffering. But, the Biden administration came in saying the environment was going to be a big, important issue. Obviously, environmentalists have signaled that if we don't do something about climate change now, that we won't even have another 30, 40 years. So this is why we've seen announcements like this week. The Biden team has said that they're going to build wind farms off the coast of the eastern United States. If you're taking off out of JFK, look for those windmills. That's energy in motion.
What's better than a wind farm if you don't have to be around it? I mean, seriously, I have no idea. Like my conservative credentials are already tossed out the window. I think we build the infrastructure. The big thing is like we need energy. We need this stuff. Somebody's got to pay for it. Let's do it now. There's no better time. Listen, when you got like rappers selling Nike rip-off shoes, the 666 Demon shoes for $1,000, when you got like people buying tweets from Jack Dorsey, when you got this whole NFT craze going on, I mean, is money really an object? It's not. Let's build now. Let's build back better. Joe Biden, as I've said, like he's always been a man on a mission. He's a one-termer. He's going to get stuff done. Let's get on board. Get on board, Brendan. What are you against infrastructure?
No, I love infrastructure. If there had been support for the Trump infrastructure plan years ago, we would have spent way less than the $4 trillion we've already spent trying to support the COVID rebuilding, because this would have generated jobs. It would have helped with our roads, with our highways, with our drilling, with our everything. That there was, of course, a way to do this before, but the big pivot point, of course, has been the Democratic Congress and a Democratic leader. That takes us to, like you've called him many times, the most powerful man in Washington, Joe Manchin. Now, that's the thing. Joe Manchin is, in fact, the big linchpin vote. And in some ways, he's taken the wind out of Democrats' sails. In this 50-50 margin, especially when there's this debate over the filibuster and things like that, the question at hand is, does any dissenter actually compromise the ability of Democrats to be the power holders, to get anything done?
Yeah, of course. Well, I don't know. Like, all I know is like Joe Manchin wakes up every day and he's like, what can I do for West Virginia? And God, by golly, he's going to do it. And there's a great headline, Jonathan Martin, New York Times. I'm going to read it for you. And Washington policy revolves around Joe Manchin, and he likes it. I mean, what's better than that? And another story, very deep in the bowels inside baseball. Joe Manchin's wife, Gail Manchin, was appointed to, quote, a key member of the Joe Biden administration. A key member. I mean, like, only in D.C. would this happen. Like, even Joe Biden wakes up every day and is like, what can I do for Joe Manchin? What can I do for Gail Manchin? What can I do for West Virginia? That's how important Joe Biden is. In fact, I've come up with a key phrase, which may catch on. PLOTUS, third lady of the United States. We've got the second gentleman. We've got the second first lady. Now we've got the third first lady, Gail Manchin. Get your T-shirts now.
Oh boy. Well,
that's a new edition. I didn't know if I told you, Brendan. We're launching a merch line here in the Huddle. Click below. Is that how you do that?
Well, good. You know, after the merch line, maybe we can get a house band to support my long-standing desire for a rim shot every time I tell a stupid joke on this show. So
listen, this is a sidebar, but I mean, our intro song is pretty great. You discovered it, and then you co-wrote it with Moby, if I'm not mistaken. But we do need a house band. But let's go full circle. Do we get a house band from West Virginia to please Manchin? And do we require the house band to have vaccination passport? That's a key question. And third one, do we do it live? These are key questions.
Then this is the issue. This is the set of issues facing America today. Like you said, every day Manchin wakes up and he realizes, what can I do to help my constituents secure my reelection? And maybe if I have time, help America. And so it's quite a time to be alive, especially for Joe Manchin.
Listen, I got two more things I want to talk about though before we go.
Yeah.
American Petroleum Institute came out in support of a carbon tax, which I think is a huge, also big ruction point news. This is big oil. They've said, hey, we're on board with the carbon tax, some kind of carbon capture tax, whether that is some kind of trade system or a flat out tax is kind of interesting. And I know you've been following this. Canadian Supreme Court approved and sanctioned, justified, said that Trudeau's carbon tax plan in Canada is legitimate under Canadian law. So you got a lot of moving parts: wind energy, infrastructure, West Virginia, big oil. There's a lot going on here. And I think it all kind of comes together around climate, energy, policy, election, kind of interesting stuff. So something to think about.
These are the big issues that Joe Biden, of course, had tapped former Secretary of State John Kerry to investigate and lead in the big picture. He said he specifically needed a climate liaison because it needed a cabinet level voice between the issue and the president to be able to constantly interface with the changing challenge of climate change. I'd like to know, in between his private jet rides, where is John Kerry? What's he doing about oil these days? Maybe he's out there measuring for the windmills off the coast of the United States.
Off the coast of Martha's Vineyard. Let's pivot to, as we started, we're 1,316 days to election 2024, and we're less than, as we record this, I think we're 69 days, we're less than 70 days, clearly less than 100 days in the Joe Biden administration. And Caitlin Collins from CNN, press conference, first one, press all clamoring, we need to talk to Joe Biden. What do they ask him? They ask him if he's running for president in 2024. Of course, he says
they don't ask him how he's dealing with the pandemic,
no,
an issue that we've done 2 full episodes about.
Why would you ask about that? He asks him, and he quotes, "My plan is to run for re-election." I mean, of course, what else is going to say? I can't believe this is already being asked. I mean, listen, I understand policy is boring. It's not very interesting. It doesn't drive ratings. But to ask a guy he hasn't been in office for more than 3 months, if he's going to run for 2024, I don't know. I mean, White House press corps, do better is all I got to say around that. But we can't blame the White House press corps as well. C-SPAN, your favorite channel, has already started Road to the 2024 White House. They've broadcasted shows already. I mean, this whole this industrial complex around campaigns, especially on the presidential campaigns, pretty amazing. I mean, maybe we're talking about it, so maybe we're part of the problem. I'm not sure.
The thing that I just have to leave it as is that Joe Biden doesn't want to end up as neutered as his dog by admitting he's not running for a second term. He needs to keep as much power as he can. Otherwise, Joe Manchin would definitely be the most powerful Joe in Washington. So for now, He'll say he's running. There's a million reasons why he might not, but I think we can get to that in 2.5 years.
But I don't know. Like, if we look at Ted Cruz, who I'm sure many of you have been following his Twitter stream, he was down there on the border of the Rio Grande, in the muck, in the mud, in the river, in the Rhine, looking across the river there. Great footage. I had all the production value of the Blair Witch Project. He's also running. I mean, this whole attempt to make news, get in front of attention, be more powerful than Joe Manchin, it's kind of driving a lot of members of the U.S. Senate pretty crazy.
Well, on that same list, though, who are definitely out there, former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, who's been marching around Iowa, certainly is not missing his chance to try to establish himself as a national player. He did not have the best reputation as Secretary of State, but he is not going to deflate his own chances this early on by making sure that anybody in the middle of the country forgets about it.
What are you talking about? I mean, a lot of people go to spring break in Iowa.
All right, Mark, one more thing before we go. You know how it goes over here at the Huddle. Inner Circle Analysis. Tell us who you're seeing for your Huddle this week.
Well, I'm going to tell you who I'm not going to have on my Huddle. The U.S. men's soccer team is not going to go to the Olympics in Tokyo. For the third competition in a row, they failed to qualify. This is an unbelievable embarrassment. The entire U.S. men's soccer team program out of the Huddle. Total embarrassment. I can't, I'm speechless. I'm godsmacked. Got to do better.
We've seen conversations about equal pay with the women's national team, notoriously revealing that they were paid less for their performance when they were the ones who were outperforming the men's team. I'm going to pick Megan Rapinoe and the women's national team to be in my Huddle. You know why? Because it's money well spent. We asked them to win. It's a single goal when you are a team like a soccer team. We ask them to win, and that's what they do. So I'm picking the women's national team to show exactly why you didn't pick the men. 3 years? Embarrassing. Well, Mark, but coming back to sports and the Olympics, we will talk more about that next week. We've got a great episode that's going to talk about the international context of these games that have been postponed, the upcoming 2022 games in Beijing, which have stirred a lot of controversy, and of course, the sportsmanship and diplomacy that brings it all together.
Now, I'm super keen for this new episode. As you rightly said, listen, it's sports, geopolitics, soft power, diplomacy. It all comes together around the Olympics. It's going to be great to see.
All right, Mark, we will see you next week. You have a good week.